Hey everyone! I tried to find the most plain place in the classroom, and this is what I came up with. So sorry if it's a little bit different than usual, but I think we'll be all right. The book I have today for the Magic Treehouse series is Polar Bears Past Bedtime, number 12. Chapter 1. Are you serious? Woo! The strange sound came from outside the open window. Jack opened his eyes in the dark. The sound came again. Whoo! Jack sat up and turned on his light. He put on his glasses. Then he grabbed the flashlight from his table and shone it out the window. A white, snowy owl was sitting in a tree branch. Whoo! The owl said again. Its large yellow eyes looked right into Jack's. What does he want? Jack wondered. Is it a sign like the rabbit and the gazelle? A long-legged rabbit and a gazelle had led Jack and Annie to the magic tree house for their last two adventures. Whoo! Wait a second, Jack said to the owl. I'll get Annie. Jack's sister Annie always seemed to know what birds and animals were saying. Jack jumped out of bed and hurried to Annie's room. She was sound asleep. What? Jack shook her as she stirred. Come to my room, whispered Jack. I think Morgan sent another sign. In a split second, Annie was out of bed. She hurried with Jack to his room. Jack led her to the window. The snowy owl was still there. Whoo, said the owl. Then he raised his white wings and he took off into the night. He wants us to go to the woods, said Annie. That's what I thought, said Jack. Meet you downstairs after we get dressed. No, he says go now, right now, said Annie. We have to go in our pajamas. I have to put on my sneakers, said Jack. Okay, I'll put mine on too. Meet you downstairs, said Annie. Jack pulled on his sneakers. He threw his notebook into his backpack. Then he grabbed his flashlight and tiptoed downstairs. Annie was waiting at the front door. They silently slipped outside together. The night air was warm. Moths danced around in the porch light. I feel weird, said Jack. I'm going back to put on some real clothes. You can't, said Annie. The owl said right now. She jumped off the porch and headed across their dark yard. Jack groaned. How did Annie even know exactly what the owl said? He wondered. Still, he didn't want to be left behind, so he took off after her. The moon lit their way as they ran down the street. When they entered the Frog Creek woods, Jack turned on his flashlight. The beam of light showed shadows and swaying branches. Jack and Annie stepped in between the trees. They stayed close together. Whoo! Jack jumped in fear. It's the white owl, said Annie. He's somewhere nearby. The woods are creepy, said Jack. Yeah, said Annie. In the dark, it doesn't even feel like our woods. Suddenly, the owl flapped near them. Yikes, said Annie. Jack shone his flashlight on the white bird as it rose into the sky. The owl landed on a tree branch right next to the magic tree house. And there was Morgan Le Fay, the enchantress librarian. Her long white hair gleamed in the beam of Jack's flashlight. Hello, Morgan said softly in a soothing voice. Climb up. Jack used his flashlight to find the rope ladder. Then he and Annie climbed up into the treehouse. Morgan was holding 3 scrolls. Each one held the answer to an ancient riddle that Jack and Annie had already solved. You have journeyed to the ocean, to the Wild West, and Africa to find the answers to these 3 riddles, said Morgan. Ready for another journey? Yes, said Jack and Annie together. Morgan pulled a 4th scroll from the folds of her robe. She handed it to Annie. After we solve this riddle, we will become master librarians. Will we? Said Annie. And have you gathered books through time and space? Said Jack. Almost, said Morgan. Before Jack could ask what she meant, but Morgan pulled out a book and gave it to him. For your research, she said. Jack and Annie looked at the book's title. Adventure in the Arctic. Oh, wow, the Arctic, said Annie. The Arctic, said Jack. Are you serious? Indeed I am, Morgan said. And you must hurry. I wish we could go there, said Annie, pointing at the cover. Wait a minute, we'll freeze to death, said Jack. Fear not, said Morgan. I am sending someone to meet you. The wind started to blow. Meet us? Who? Said Jack. Who? Said the snowy owl. Before Morgan could answer, the treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster, then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. The Howling. The air was crisp and cold. Jack and Annie shivered. They looked out the window at the dark gray sky. The treehouse was on the ground. There were no trees and no houses, only an endless field of ice and snow. Morgan and the owl were gone. Read the riddle, Annie shivered. Jack unrolled the scrolls, and he read, I cover what's real and hide what's true, but sometimes I bring out the courage in you. What am I? I'll read that again. I cover what's real and hide what's true, but sometimes I bring out the courage in you. What am I? I'd better write it down, Jack said, shivering. He pulled out his notebook and copied the riddle. Then he opened the book. He found a picture of a barren white field and he read aloud. The Arctic tundra is a treeless plain. During the dark winter, it is covered with snow and ice. In early spring, snow falls, but the sky begins to get lighter. During the summer season, the snow and the ice melt and the sun shines 24 hours a day. That means no nighttime. It must be early springtime now, said Jack. There's snow, but the sky is a little light. He turned the page. There was a picture of a man wearing a hooded coat with fur trim. Look at this guy, said Jack. He showed Annie the picture. We need his coat, said Annie. Yeah, listen to this, he said. Jack read out loud. The seal hunter wears sealskin clothing to protect him from icy winds. Before modern times, native people of the Arctic lived by hunting seals, caribou, polar bears, and whales. Jack took out his notebook and he wrote, The Arctic. Seal hunters wear sealskin. He was too cold to write anymore. He clutched his pack against his chest and blew on his fingers. He wished he were back home in bed. Morgan said someone was coming to meet us, said Annie. If they don't come soon, we'll freeze to death, said Jack. It's getting darker and colder. Shh, listen, said Annie. A howling sound came from the distance. Then more howling sounds and more. What's that? Said Jack. They looked out the window. Snow was falling now. It was hard to see. The howling grew louder. It was mixed with yipping and yelping noises. Jack and Annie saw dark shapes coming through the snow. They seemed to be running toward the treehouse. Wolves? Said Annie. Great, that's all we need, said Jack. We're freezing and now a pack of wolves is coming for us. Jack pulled Annie into the corner of the treehouse. They huddled close together. The howling got louder and louder. It sounded as if the wolves were circling the treehouse. They whined and yelped. Jack couldn't stand it any longer. He grabbed the Arctic book. Maybe this can help us, he said. He searched for a picture of wolves. Oh, hi, said Annie. Jack looked up. He caught his breath. A man was looking through the treehouse window. His face was surrounded by fur. It was a seal hunter from the Arctic book. Chapter 3. Mush! Did you come with the wolves? Asked Annie. The seal hunter looked puzzled. Did Morgan send you to us? I had a dream, the man said. You were in it. You needed help. Morgan sends dreams sometimes, she said. We came in Morgan's treehouse. It flies through time. Oh, brother, thought Jack. Who will believe that? The seal hunter smiled, as if he was not surprised at all. We do need help, said Jack. We're freezing. The seal hunter nodded. Then he left the window. He returned a moment later with 2 small parkas like his own. They were made of heavy dark skins with fur-trimmed hoods. He passed one to Jack and one to Annie. Thanks, said Jack and Annie. They put the parkas on. Hooray, said Annie. It's warm. Yeah, said Jack. They're made of sealskin. Poor seals, said Annie. Don't think about it, said Jack. He pulled his hood up. His head and upper body were very snug now. Only his legs, hands and feet were still freezing. Oh, thanks, said Annie. Jack looked up. The seal hunter was giving Annie a pair of fur pants. Then he handed a pair to Jack. Thanks, said Jack. He quickly pulled the pants on over his pajamas. Next, the seal hunter gave each of them a pair of fur boots and mittens. Jack took off his sneakers and pulled on the boots. He wiggled his frozen fingers into the warm mittens. I have a quick question, said Jack to the seal hunter. Do you know the answer to this riddle? He opened his notebook and he read, I cover what's real and hide what's true, but sometimes I bring out the courage in you. What am I? The seal hunter shook his head. Come, he said to Jack and Annie. Then he disappeared from the window. What about the wolves out there, said Jack. But the seal hunter didn't answer. Jack grabbed the Arctic book and looked for a picture of the seal hunter. When Jack found a picture, he smiled. The seal hunter was standing beside a dog sled. Jack read, in cold weather, the seal hunter travels by dog sled. Siberian huskies often howl like wolves. A lead dog controls the others. The sled's runners are sometimes made of frozen fish rolled up in sealskin. Hey, Annie, they're not wolves, said Jack. They're... He looked up. Annie was gone. Jack threw the book and notebook into his pack, but he was so fat in his furry clothes that the backpack wouldn't fit. Jack loosened the shoulder straps and tried to put the backpack on again, and it fit this time. Jack looked at the small window. That would be a tight fit, too. He went out head first and barely squeezed through. Jack fell into the snowy ground. The snow was still drifting down. The air was misty white. Jack heard barking and howling. He moved carefully toward the treehouse, or toward the noise. At first, he couldn't see the dog sled, but when he got closer, he counted 9 Siberian huskies. They had thick fur, big heads, and pointy ears. The lead dog barked at him. Jack stopped. He's telling you to climb on, said Annie. She was standing on the back of the sled. The seal hunter stood next to her in the snow. Jack jumped into the sled next to Annie. The seal hunter cracked a long whip. Mush! He shouted. The huskies dashed off into a whirl of snow. Above them flew the snowy owl. Chapter 4. Snow House. The dog sled skimmed silently over the frozen tundra. The seal hunter ran alongside it. Sometimes he cracked his whip against the ice. The snowdrifts looked like giant white sculptures as the sun slipped behind the frozen hills. Then a full orange moon rose in the sky. The moonlight lit a small rounded igloo in front of them. The dog slowed and then stopped. Jack stepped off the sled. Annie went to help unhitch the dogs. Jack took his book out and read about igloos. The word igloo means house in the language of the native Arctic people. The house is built with blocks of snow. Dry snow is good wall material because it keeps in the heat. The temperature inside of an igloo can be 65 degrees, warmer than the temperature on the outside. Chuck took out his notebook and he pulled out of his mittens just long enough to write, igloo means house. Come on, Jack, said Annie. She and the seal hunter were waiting for him in front of the igloo. The dogs were leashed together outside. Jack hurried outside to join them. The hunter pushed aside animal skins covering the entrance. They stepped inside. A fat candle burned brightly. Shadows danced on the walls of the ice and snow. Jack and Annie sat on a fur-covered platform. They watched as the seal hunter moved about. First, he lit a small stove. Then he slipped outside. He came back with a snowball and chunks of frozen meat. He put the snowball in a pot over the stove. Then he added the meat. What's he making? Said Annie. Jack pulled his book out and found a picture of the hunter cooking. He and Annie read the words silently. There was a time when nearly all of the Arctic people's food and clothing and tools came from the Arctic animals, especially the seal. Nearly every part of the seal could be eaten. Lamps were fueled with seal fat, clothing was made from sealskin, and knives and needles were carved from seal bones. He must be boiling seal meat, said Jack. The poor seals, said Annie. The seal hunter looked up. They are not poor, he said. They help us because they know we would die without them. Oh, said Annie. In return, we always thank the animal spirits, said the seal hunter. How do you do that? Said Jack. We have many special ceremonies, said the seal hunter. He reached under the fur-covered platform and he took out 2 wooden masks. Soon there will be a ceremony to honor the spirit of the polar bear, he said. I carved these masks for the ceremony. Polar bears? Asked Annie. Yes, said the seal hunter. Just as the seal has given us many gifts, so has the polar bear. Like what? Said Jack. Long ago, the polar bear taught us how to live in the ice and snow, said the seal hunter. Taught you? Said Jack. I mean, can you give us some facts? The seal hunter smiled. Yes. A polar bear catches a seal when the seal comes up to breathe through a hole in the ice. The oldest seal hunters watched the polar bear and learned. This is how my father taught me to hunt seal, as his father taught him. That's a good fact, said Jack. The very first of my people learned it to make igloos from polar bears, said the hunter. Polar bears build snow houses by digging caves in the drifts. Oh, very good fact, said Jack. Sometimes the polar bear can even teach people how to fly, said the seal hunter. That's an amazing fact, said Annie. Jack smiled. The rest sounded like true facts, but I know that's pretend. The hunter just laughed, and then he turned back to his cooking. That's why he wasn't surprised to hear about the treehouse, Jack thought. If he believes polar bears can fly, he probably would believe anything. The seal hunter lifted the chunks of boiled seal out of his pot. He dropped them into a wooden bucket and gave it to Annie. Let's feed the dogs, he said. Oh boy, said Annie. She followed the hunter outside, swinging the bucket. Jack quickly threw his notebook and the archer book into his pack. He started to follow them, then his gaze fell on the 2 polar bear masks. He picked them up to get a better look. Each was carved in the shape of a polar bear's face, with a blunt nose and roundish ears. There were 2 holes for eyes and a strap to hold it onto your head. Suddenly, howls split the air. The dogs were barking and growling. Annie squealed. Are the dogs attacking her? Thought Jack. Annie, still holding the bear masks, Jack charged out of the igloo. Chapter 5. You're it. The dogs were barking wildly at 2 small creatures playing in the moonlight. Polar bear babies, said Annie. One roly-poly cub leaped onto the other. Hi, little bears. They rolled through the snow. The cubs jumped up and shook themselves like wet puppies. Then they scampered toward Annie, who rushed to greet them. Hi, 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 she called. Wait, shouted Jack. Where's their mother? He looked around for the mother bear, but she was nowhere in sight. Maybe they're orphans, he thought. Jack looked back at Annie. She was wrestling with the little bears in the snow. She was laughing so hard that she couldn't stand. Jack started laughing too. He carefully put the bear masks into his pack. Then he ran to join Annie. She was running with the cubs across the snowy tundra. One of them raced to her, tagged her, and then raced away. Annie ran after the bear and tagged him back. "You're it," she said. Jack and the other cub joined in. Soon, Jack and Annie and the other two cubs were all chasing each other around the moonlit snow. They ran until the cubs fell down ahead of them. They laid perfectly still. Panting, Jack and Annie stared at them. "Are they hurt?" Annie wondered. Jack and Annie ran to the cubs. Then, just as they leaned down to see if they were all right, the cubs jumped up. They pushed Jack and Annie over and scampered away. "They were pretending," Jack said and laughed. Jack and Annie charged after the cubs. They ran over to the white tundra until they came to the frozen sea. Jack looked all around. "We're pretty far from the igloo. I don't hear the huskies anymore. Maybe we should go back." "In a minute," said Annie. "Look." The bear cubs had scooted up a snowbank. They were on their backs, sliding down the bank onto the ice-covered sea. Jack and Annie laughed. "It's like sledding," said Annie. "Let's try it." "Okay, but then we have to go back." Jack followed Annie up the snowbank. He clutched his pack in his arms. Annie laid on her back and she whooped as she slid down the ice. Jack followed her. "Watch out below," he shouted. The little bears were sitting at the bottom of the snowbank. One gently whacked Jack in the face with her furry paw. Then she laid down. "I'm tired too," said Annie. "Yeah," said Jack. "Let's rest for just a minute." Jack and Annie looked up at the orange moon as they lay beside the cubs. All they could hear was the wind, the soft breathing of the cubs. "That was fun," said Annie. "It was," said Jack, "but we better head to the igloo. The seal hunter's probably looking for us. Plus, we have to solve the riddle." Jack rolled onto his side and tried to stand. Crack. "Uh-oh," he said. He went back down onto his knees. "I think we're on thin ice." "What do you mean?" said Annie. She started to stand. Another crack rang out. "Uh-oh," she said. She carefully laid back down. The polar bear cubs moved closer to Jack and Annie. They made little crying sounds. Jack wanted to cry too, but he took a deep breath. "Let's see what our book says," he said. He reached into his pack for the Arctic book. He took out the masks first and then handed them to Annie. "I took these from the igloo by mistake," he said. As he started to reach for his Arctic book, he heard the loudest crack of all. "Crack! We're not even moving and the ice is cracking," said Annie. Just then, there was a new sound, a low, snorting sound. It came from the top of the snowbank about 50 feet away. Jack looked up. Staring down at them was the giant polar bear. "The polar bear mother," whispered Annie. Chapter 6, Flying Bears. The cubs whimpered louder. "They want to go to her, but they're afraid of the ice," whispered Jack. Annie petted the cubs. "Don't be afraid," she told them. "You get back to your mother." The polar bear growled. She paced back and forth, sniffing the air. Annie kept patting the two cubs and whispering to them. Jack looked in his book for anything that might help, and finally he found something. Even though a female polar bear can weigh as much as 750 pounds, she can walk on ice too thin to hold a person by balancing her weight and sliding her paws over the ice. "Oh man, that's incredible," said Jack. He watched the mother polar bear walk down to the snowbank. On large, silent feet, she crept about at the edge of the frozen sea. She tried to step onto the ice, but each time she did, it cracked, and so she had to retreat. At last, she found a firm spot. Then the polar bear stretched out her forelegs and laid on the ice. Slowly, she moved forward, pushing herself with her claws. "Is she coming for her babies?" asked Jack. "Or is she coming to get us?" "I don't know," said Annie. "Hey, let's put the masks on." "What for?" "Maybe they'll protect us. Maybe she'll think we're polar bears too." "Oh, brother," said Jack. But Annie gave him a bear mask. He took his glasses off and slipped it on. Jack peered through the mask holes. It was hard to see the huge white bear sliding over the frozen sea. He squinted. That helped. The polar bear looked at her cubs and let out a deep moan. The two little bears carefully went to their mother. She licked the cubs and touched her nose against each of their babies. Then they crawled onto her back. "They're safe now," said Jack. "Even the mother breaks through the ice. Even if she does, she can swim with them to shore." "Yeah, I just wish she wouldn't leave us behind," said Annie. The mother bear slowly turned her body around. Then she pushed off with her hind legs. With her cubs on her back, she began sliding away. "Let's try moving like her," said Annie. "But we could break through and freeze to death." If we stay here, we'll freeze too." "Remember, the seal hunter said that people had learned a lot from the polar bears." Jack took a deep breath. "Okay, let's try it." He laid on his stomach, and then he spread out his arms and his legs. He copied the bear. Then he pressed his mittens against the ice and pushed off, sliding his feet. Amazingly, there was no cracking sound. "Grrr," he growled, and he pushed off again. Jack heard Annie sliding behind him. He kept going. He pushed and slid, and he pushed and he slid again. He made the movements over and over until something happened. He didn't feel like a boy anymore. He felt like a polar bear. Then Jack felt something even stranger. He felt like a flying polar bear. Jack swirled along as if his arms and legs were giant wings, and the moonlit sea ice was a glassy sky. He remembered what the seal hunter had said. Polar bears can fly. Chapter 7. Spirit Lights. Jack, you can get up now, said Annie. Jack opened his eyes. Annie was standing over him. She still had her mask on. We're safe on the ground. Jack felt as if he had been dreaming. He looked around. They had reached the tundra at the edge of the frozen sea. The cubs were romping in the distance, but their mother was sitting nearby, gazing at Jack and Annie. She waited to make sure we were safe, said Annie. Jack stared at the polar bear in awe. The words of the seal hunter came back to him. Always thank the animal spirits. We should say thank you to the polar bear spirit now, he said. Of course, said Annie. Jack scrambled to his feet. Still wearing his bear mask, he stood before the polar bear and pressed his hands together. We thank you, he said, bowing. Yes, we thank you forever, said Annie, also bowing. We thank you beyond the moon and beyond the stars, said Jack. And beyond the deepest sea, Annie said. Then she threw out her arms and twirled around. Jack did the same. They both danced around in the snow, honoring the bear. Finally, they stopped and bowed one last time. When they looked up, the polar bear rose up on her hind legs. She was twice as tall as Jack. She lowered her huge head as if she were bowing back to them. At that moment, the sky exploded. Not really exploded. The night became a giant swirl of red, green, and purple lights. It looked like a genie was coming out of a magic lamp. The sight took Jack's breath away. He stared in wonder at the dazzling lights as the dazzling lights lit the tundra. Is that the polar bear spirit? Asked Annie. As far as Jack could see, the sky shimmered. Even the bear's fur shimmered in the strange light. No, that's not a spirit, said Jack. There's got to be a scientific reason. I'll find out. Shaking, he reached into his backpack and pulled out the Arctic book. He took off his bear mask and put his glasses on. By the greenish glow, Jack found a picture of the sky lights. The picture didn't come close to the real thing. He read out loud. One of the most amazing sights in the Arctic is the northern lights. The swirl of light is caused by electrically charged particles from the sun striking atoms and molecules on the Earth's atmosphere. See, there is a scientific reason, said Jack. It's not the spirits. Then suddenly all the dancing lights were gone as if someone had blown out a candle. The magic had ended. And this is where I wish there was color, because I bet this page would look beautiful. We can kind of imagine what it looks like by looking at the front cover too. Chapter 8. Riddle Solved. Now only the moon shone on the snow. Jack looked around for the polar bear. She was gone. Where did she go? I don't know, Jack said. He looked over the tundra. There was no sign of the giant bear or her cubs. Maybe she's not interested in scientific reasons, Jack said. Annie sighed. She took off her bear mask and handed it to Jack. He put both of their masks in his pack. Now what? Said Annie. They looked around. The vast fields of snow had ended in the darkness. Jack had no idea where they were. He shrugged. I guess we just have to walk and hope for the best. Wait, listen. From the distance came howling sounds. They grew louder and louder. Yay, we don't have to wait long. The huskies are coming. Howling filled the night as the dog sled came into view. The seal hunter was running beside it. We're here, over here. Jack and Annie ran to the sled. I was afraid you were lost, said the seal hunter. We were, said Annie. And we got stuck on thin ice too, but a polar bear helped us. Yeah, said Jack, and we wore your masks, just they made us feel like bears. Yeah, the mask made us brave. And then Annie caught her breath. Wait. Annie's words sounded familiar, Jack thought. He took out his notebook and read Morgan's riddle. I cover what's real and hide what's true, but sometimes I bring out the courage in you. What am I? A mask. The seal hunter smiled. You knew, said Annie. It was for you to discover, not me, he said. Jack pulled the bear masks out of his backpack. Here, he said. Thanks a lot. The hunter took the masks and put them inside his parka. We can go home now. Do you mind taking us back to the treehouse? Said Annie. The seal hunter shook his head. Climb on, he said. Jack and Annie climbed onto the dog sled. Mush, said the seal hunter. Mush, said Annie. Mush, said Jack. Snow began to fall as they took off across the dark ice. Chapter 9. Oh no, one more! By the time the dog sled arrived at the treehouse, the snowstorm had become a blizzard. Can you wait just a minute? Jack asked the seal hunter, so we can check something? The hunter nodded. His dogs whined as Jack and Annie climbed through the treehouse window. Jack grabbed the scroll that held the riddle. He unrolled it. The riddle was gone. In its place was one shimmering word, mask. We did it, said Annie. The treehouse will take us home now. Great, said Jack. Let's say goodbye to the seal hunter and give him back his clothes. They quickly pulled off their sealskin clothes and their boots. Thanks for letting us borrow these, said Jack. The seal hunter walked to the treehouse and took the clothes from Jack and Annie. They stood shivering in their pajamas and bare feet. Thanks for everything, Annie said, her teeth chattering. The seal hunter gave them a wave. Then he walked through the swirling snow to his sled. Mush, he shouted. The dogs took off through the stormy night. Let's get out of here, said Jack, before we freeze to death. Annie grabbed the Pennsylvania book. She pointed to a picture of Frog Creek Woods. I wish we could go there. They waited for the treehouse to start spinning. Nothing happened. Jack shivered. I wish we could go there, Annie said again. Again, nothing happened. Well, what's going on, said Jack. He looked around the treehouse. The 4 scrolls with the solved riddle and with the solved riddle answers were in the corner. Then he saw a 5th scroll. Where did that come from, he said. Jack grabbed it and unrolled it. On it were the words, look at the letters, the first, not the rest. Discover the place that you love the best. Oh no, another riddle, said Annie. Okay, let's stay calm, Jack said. Look at the letters, the first, not the rest. Okay, the first letters in this riddle are L-A-T-L-T. That doesn't make any sense, said Annie. The icy winds battered the treehouse. Snow blew inside. We have to hurry. Jack was freezing. He looked around wildly. Letters, what letters? He gazed. His gaze rested on the scrolls in the corner. Maybe we should look at the letters of the answers, he said. Right, said Annie. They began unrolling the scrolls. The scroll from their adventure under the ocean said oyster. The scroll from their trip to the Wild West said echo. The scroll from the journey to Africa said honey. The scroll from the Arctic said mask. Oyster, echo, honey, mask, said Jack. The first letters are O-E-H-M. So I'll show you. Oyster, echo, honey, mask. O-E-H-M. What word is that? That doesn't make any sense, said Annie. O-M? Yeah, maybe we have to unscramble the letters, said Jack. O-E-H-M. They could spell H-E-M-O, hemo, or miho, or home, cried Annie. That's the place we love the best. Jack unrolled the 5th scroll again. The riddle was gone. In its place was one shimmering word, home. Yay, cried Annie. She grabbed the Pennsylvania book. I wish we could go home. Home. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster, then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 10, Master Librarians. Warm air washed over Jack. It felt wonderful. You have succeeded in your quest, said a soothing voice. Are you glad to be home? Jack opened his eyes. Morgan the Face stood in the moonlight. Yes, he said. We solved all the riddles, said Annie. Indeed, said Morgan. You have proved that you can find answers to very hard questions. She reached into the folds of her robe and took out 2 thin pieces of wood. A magic library card for each of you, she said. She gave one to Annie and one to Jack. Oh, man, Jack said, feeling the card. The wooden card was thin and as smooth as an ordinary library card. On its surface shimmered the letters M and L. These are your Master Librarian cards, said Morgan. You are the newest members of the Ancient Society of Master Librarians. What do we do with them, said Jack. Take them on your future journeys, said Morgan. Only a very wise person or another Master Librarian will be able to see the letters. These will be the people who can help you. Wow, said Annie. Can we go on a mission right now? Now you must go home and rest, said Morgan. I will come back for you soon. Jack and Annie put their secret cards in their pockets. Then Jack took out the Arctic book and put it with the other books. Goodbye, he said. See you soon, Annie said to Morgan. Morgan gave them a little wave. Jack and Annie climbed down the rope ladder. As soon as they stepped onto the dark ground, they heard a roar. They looked up. They saw a blur of wind and light high in the oak tree. Then all was silent. Morgan and her magic treehouse were gone. Jack reached for his magic library card. When he felt the tingly warmth, he knew that amazing adventures laid ahead. Let's go, he said. He turned off his flashlight. "The woods don't feel so scary like they did before," said Annie as they walked through the trees. "I'm not afraid anymore." "Me neither," said Jack. "Hey, the darkness is like a mask." "Yeah," said Jack. "It hides the day, but it brings out your courage." Then they came out of the woods. Jack saw their house in the distance. It looked warm and cozy. The porch light had glowed. The moon shone overhead. "Home," he whispered. "Home," said Annie. She started running. Jack took off after her, running to the place that they both loved the best. And that is the end. We've finished book number 12, Polar Bears Past Bedtime. Thank you for reading with me. I love these books. I'll see you next time.